context, no definite stratigraphy, and they are often found with microlithic tools in regions like Purulia and Midnapur, northwestern Midnapur. At the site called Tamluk, which is a coastal site, from the lowest level, which was called a Neolithic level by excavators, but we do not have substantial evidence, Neolithic cells with handmade pottery were recorded. But this is something something which needs to be worked upon, something which is still we are not very clear about. In the northeast, very interestingly, many of these Neolithic cells, we do not know what their antiquity is, but they are worshipped as ritual objects by many of the ethnic communities. Eastern India, again, we take up one of the coastal sites in Orissa, a very famous site called Golbai Shashon. Golbai Shashon has a deposit of about 7 to 8 meters. This is it is in the laterite regions and on the banks of Mahanadi. Now, again, this is a multicultural site, and the Neolithic is dated to about 2300 to 2000 BC. Interestingly, no stone tools have been found here. You found pottery, mostly handmade, as well as wheel-made pottery, probably slow wheel, and bone points have been found. Piercers made of bones have been found. And the raw material used for these bone implements were possibly some of the semi-mineralized bones which were found at the site, and some antler remains have been found, probably belong to some of these antelope species. Now, what about the decorations that we are seeing in the pottery? In the handmade pottery, we are seeing that there are decorations of reed impressions on the pottery. And where it comes to the wheel-made pottery, we are seeing that there is some red ochre painting. And we are getting some floor levels from which we can talk about, again, mud brick houses. But Golbai Shashon is probably one of the only sites in coastal Orissa which has been well walked upon. So these areas need to be investigated more. Now, the southern Neolithic is very broadly, it can be divided into two types of sites: sites with ash mound and sites without ash mound. The core region of the southern Neolithic culture is basically Shorapur Dwap, Raichur, and some of these main regions. Now, Bridget Olchin and F.R. Olchin, who have worked substantially on the southern Neolithic, classifies the Neolithic, the southern Neolithic, according to changes in technology, particularly pottery production, and also according to the importance of trade imports in a Neolithic culture. Stone tools have been found from various sites. Chert blades have been found, pounders have been found, these polished stone tools have been found. What about the raw material? They're not always available in the vicinity. Like Professor K. Padaya tried to address this problem when he took up the excavation of the ash mound site of Budihal in the Shorapur Dwap. And he documented this very interesting workshop site, which is adjacent to the main Neolithic site, from where he found a lot of these chert blades which are larger than the microlithic ones. And he surmised that the chert sources were in some of the neighboring chert veins found in the limestone rocks, probably not on the site, but a little distance away. Now, such studies are required much more if we want to say much more about, if we want to know more about the southern Neolithic culture. Now, next, if we think of pottery, what kind of work has been done so far? Pottery, we see that again, Neolithic, southern Neolithic, basically two main types are categorized, like the redware and the greyware. But there are variations of this, and in the excavation at Wadkal in Raichur Dwap, these variations are coming up. More interesting work can happen if we look at if we compare the different kinds of pottery, their variations, and if we try to understand the clay sources from which these different wares were made. From there, one can make out if there was a communication between these different localities, what was the nature of communication, for which the archaeological representation is in pottery throughout the southern Neolithic, as well as the relationship between northern sites in the northern Neolithic, north of the Vindhyas, and the southern Neolithic cultures. Because sometimes what archaeologists do, when they see similar wares, similar forms in two distant places, two distant sites, they draw a conclusion, they draw some kind of connection. To draw upon these connections, to build upon these connections, to see whether there was widespread interaction between these different communities, one needs to do more scientific work with samples of pottery as well as clay sources, etc. Now, a lot of beads have also been found. Metal, surprisingly, has not been found so much in the southern Neolithic cultures. In the northern Neolithic cultures, in some places, copper has been found. Very, very raw variety of copper, not the kind that you're finding in the Chalcolithic. Now, and this copper that I just mentioned has been found in Kanishkapur, a site which I talked about when I talked of northwestern Indian Neolithic. Now, southern Neolithic, absolutely no trace whatsoever. Very interesting paleopathological studies have been done on skeletal remains, trying to understand what diseases afflicted these people, and archaeozoological studies, trying to understand the beginnings of domestication. Like if the evidence so far has been chiefly of cattle pastoralism, whether there has been a bias in our study. Why just cattle? Weren't other species sort of domesticated? These are certain queries, and these are certain lines of inquiry which can propel us to further investigations. So we see from this very brief review of Neolithic cultures in the Indian subcontinent that in South Asia, why I'm saying South Asia is because I included Balochistan. We are finding varied patterns of this in man's life, in human civilization. Varied patterns, varied representation in the archaeological assemblage, and the diversity from which we can understand the diversity of ways of life. Still more work is required. Still more regions need to be highlighted. Like I just mentioned, Eastern India, especially Bengal and parts of the Northeast, parts of Orissa. Not only that, not only are new regions, they require to come under excavations and more detailed study, but also we have to be more introspective. We have to ask more detailed questions about how basically this is the time that we are seeing a development, just the beginning of the development of a social hierarchy. So how do we relate the archaeological evidence to this? How do we relate the archaeological evidence to social organization? Because on many occasions we are finding a whole lot of archaeological evidence, very, very colorful archaeological evidence. But sometimes what is lacking in the excavation reports is a more introspective understanding of the relationship of social organization to archaeological evidence, how far archaeological evidence can throw light on this. So I do hope future research can throw more light on this, and I hope you enjoyed this hearing this story about this phase of man's life on earth. Thank you.
Hello viewers, welcome back. Today we are going to discuss about a very important lesson on characteristics of old age. Now this is a particular topic, and this is considered to be this period is considered to be the last lifespan in the individual's life. So very importantly, we are today here to discuss about the various characteristics in late adulthood or old age. Now the last stage is the lifespan, and it is frequently subdivided into two parts. Now the first part is called as the early old age, now which consists of age from 60 years onwards and till 70 years. So people who come under 60 to 70 years can be called as elderly, and the advanced age group, people with age group of 70 and till the end of their life, are considered to be old people. Now people during 60s, as I have told you, are referred to elderly, and people who are above 70 are referred to as old age. Now these are the people who have almost lost their vigor of youth, and hence they are considered to be old. Like childhood and young adulthood and middle age, it is quite obvious that late adulthood, that is old age, is also characterized by certain physical and psychological changes, and very importantly, the results or the impact of these changes